The secret I couldn't hide. The espresso machine hissed and steamed behind me, its familiar sound a comfort in the chaos of the Friday night rush at Bellissimo. I balanced 3 plates of pasta along my arm, the scent of garlic and basil making my stomach growl. 6 months back at work after maternity leave, and I still wasn't used to the pace again. "Table 7, Elena," Marco called from the kitchen. I nodded, blowing a strand of dark hair from my face. My feet ached in the sensible black shoes I'd worn for my double shift. Unlike the other waitresses with their perfect makeup and flirtatious smiles, I couldn't afford the luxury of discomfort. Not with a 14-month-old waiting at home. As I set the plates down for the young couple at table 7, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored wall. Exhaustion etched around my eyes, my once vibrant features dulled by sleepless nights and endless worry. At 26, I looked at least 5 years older. "Anything else I can get you?" I asked, summoning a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The woman, draped in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, barely looked up. "The Parmesan. Fresh, not pre-grated." I was turning to fetch it when the front door opened, and the restaurant's ambient chatter dropped to a murmur. It always happened this way when he arrived. Like animals sensing a predator, people instinctively lowered their voices, their eyes darting nervously before fixing firmly on their plates. I didn't need to look to know it was him. The air itself seemed to change, charged with danger, and something else I refused to name, but my eyes betrayed me, drawn to him like a moth to flame. Dante Russo, owner of this restaurant and 3 others across the city, officially a successful businessman. Unofficially, the head of one of the most powerful crime families in Boston, the father of my son. He moved with the casual confidence of a man who feared nothing and no one, his charcoal suit tailored to his broad shoulders, making even his simplest movements seem like a display of power. 2 men flanked him, one older with salt and pepper hair who I recognized as his consigliere, the other younger with watchful eyes constantly scanning the room. My hands trembled as I retreated to the kitchen, my heart hammering against my ribs. In 14 months, I'd managed to avoid him almost entirely. A miracle considering he owned the restaurant. But I'd switched to day shifts after my brief vacation to have the baby, only picking up night shifts when I heard he was out of town. Tonight was supposed to be safe. Marco had assured me Dante was attending some gala across town. "Elena." Marco's voice startled me as I entered the kitchen. The head chef's face was grim. "Mr. Russo is asking for you." Ice flooded my veins. "Me? Why?" Marco shrugged, but the sympathy in his eyes told me he suspected more than he let on. "He's in the private dining room. Best not to keep him waiting." My fingers clutched the edge of the steel prep table. "Can't Sophia go? I have 3 tables waiting for Elena." Marco's tone was gentle but firm. "He asked for you specifically." The walk to the private dining room felt like a death march. Each step on the polished floor echoed my rising panic. One night, one mistake. That's all it had taken to shatter my carefully constructed life, and now the consequences weren't just mine to bear. Little Matteo's face flashed in my mind. His dark curls and amber eyes, his father's eyes. I paused outside the heavy oak door, smoothing my black apron with damp palms. A prayer formed on my lips that this was just a coincidence, that he simply wanted to discuss the restaurant that he hadn't somehow discovered. The door opened before I could knock. The younger bodyguard's face was expressionless as he stepped aside to let me enter. Dante sat alone at the head of the long table, a single glass of whiskey before him. The room's dim lighting carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, highlighting the strong line of his jaw. At 38, he was in his prime, dangerously handsome in a way that made women forget the rumors that followed him like shadows. "Elena." My name in his mouth sounded different, the Italian pronunciation rolling off his tongue like dark honey. "It's been a while." I kept my eyes lowered, hands clasped before me. "Mr. Russo, what can I get for you tonight?" A soft chuckle. "Look at me, Cara." The endearment sent a shiver down my spine. Not entirely from fear. Slowly, I raised my gaze to meet his. Those eyes. The exact shade of amber that greeted me every morning when I lifted my son from his crib. 14 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. His voice was conversational, but I didn't miss the dangerous edge beneath. That's how long it's been since you disappeared from my night shift staff, since you served me dinner right at this table, accepted my invitation for a drink after your shift, and ended up in my bed." He tilted his head, studying me, and then vanished. My throat constricted. I needed a change of schedule. For personal reasons. Personal reasons, he repeated, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Such as having a baby, perhaps? The room tilted beneath my feet. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "I don't see how my personal life is any of your concern, Mr. Russo." His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Sit down, Elena." It wasn't a request. I sank into the chair, legs suddenly too weak to support me. "I have a policy of respecting my employees' privacy," he continued. "What they do outside these walls is their business, unless it becomes mine." He reached into his jacket and withdrew his phone. After a moment, he turned the screen toward me. "Is this your son?" The picture showed Mateo in the arms of my neighbor, Mrs. Petrov, who watched him during my shifts. They were in the park 2 blocks from my apartment. Mateo's face was caught mid-laugh, his amber eyes bright in the sunlight. Acid burned the back of my throat. "How did you—" "That's not the important question, Elena." His voice remained calm, almost gentle. "The important question is why your son has my eyes, my mother's chin, and the same birthmark on his shoulder that every firstborn Russo male has had for 5 generations. The walls closed in around me. This couldn't be happening. I'd been so careful, moving to a different neighborhood, switching my shifts, even telling my family I'd had a brief relationship with a man who'd moved abroad before I discovered I was pregnant. Answer me." Steel threaded through his soft command. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, the lie bitter on my tongue. "Mateo's father was— Don't." The single word cut through the air like a blade. "Don't insult my intelligence. It insults yours as well, and I've always thought you were smarter than this." Tears burned behind my eyes. "What do you want from me?" Dante leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. The subtle scent of his cologne, cedar and spice, triggered memories I'd fought to suppress for months. "The truth would be a good start," he said. "Why did you hide my son from me?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with unspoken threats. I knew the stories about Dante Russo, how he dealt with those who betrayed him, how completely he destroyed his enemies, but I also remembered other things. His unexpected gentleness that night, the way his fingers had traced my face in the darkness, the rare vulnerability in his eyes when he'd spoken of his childhood. "I was afraid," I finally admitted, my voice barely audible. His expression darkened. "Of me?" I swallowed hard. "Of your world. Of what it would mean for my baby to be part of it." I met his gaze directly, and yes, of you, of what you might think, that I planned it, that I wanted your money, or— A sharp knock interrupted us. The door opened, and the older bodyguard stepped in. "Scusi, boss. Janelli is here. Says it's urgent." Dante's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked genuinely regretful. "Wait here," he told me, rising from his chair. "This conversation is far from over." As soon as the door closed behind him, I bolted to my feet. Panic clawed at my chest as I searched frantically for another exit. There was none. Just as I was contemplating the chances of slipping past the guard I knew would be stationed outside, my phone vibrated in my apron pocket. A text from Mrs. Petrov. "Where are you?" "Been trying to call. Mateo has fever. Taking him to ER. Meet us there." Horror washed over me in a cold wave. My baby was sick, and I was trapped in this room with a man who had every reason to destroy me. A man who now knew about his son, the son I'd hidden from him. The private room had a second door that led to a back hallway used for deliveries. It was usually locked, but I'd seen Marco use it once when a freezer repair couldn't come through the main entrance. Desperation gave me courage. I tried the handle, and by some miracle, it turned. Casting one last glance at the main door, I slipped into the dimly lit corridor and ran, tears blurring my vision. I had to get to Mateo, and then we had to disappear. Because Dante Russo had found us, and I knew with bone-deep certainty that he would never let his son go, or me. The emergency room buzzed with fluorescent lights and quiet desperation. I pushed through the sliding doors, my heart in my throat, still wearing my waitress uniform. The smell of antiseptic stung my nostrils as I frantically scanned the crowded waiting area. "Elena! Over here!" Mrs. Petrov's accented voice called from a corner where she cradled my whimpering son. I rushed to them, my legs weak with relief just to see him. Mateo's cheeks were flushed with fever, his dark curls damp against his forehead. When he saw me, he reached out with chubby hands, his amber eyes, his father's eyes, bright with tears. "Mama," he cried, and the single word shattered something inside me. "My baby," I whispered, gathering him into my arms. His little body burned against mine. "What happened?" Mrs. Petrov shook her head, worry etched in the lines of her weathered face. "Fever came very fast, 1 minute playing, next minute burning up. He not want to drink, not want to eat. I tried to call you many times." Guilt stabbed through me. I'd left my phone on silent during my shift and hadn't checked it until that moment in Dante's private dining room. "I'm so sorry. Thank you for bringing him in." I pressed my lips to Mateo's forehead, flinching at the heat radiating from his skin. "Has a doctor seen him yet? They take temperature. Say wait." She gestured to the packed waiting room. Many sick children tonight. I sank into a plastic chair, cradling Mateo against my chest as he fussed and whimpered. My mind raced with twin terrors. My son's illness and the man I'd just fled from. Dante wouldn't simply let this go. A man like him, who commanded respect with a glance and ended problems with a word, wouldn't accept being walked out on, twice. An hour crawled by. Mateo's fever seemed to climb despite the children's Tylenol the nurse had finally brought. His little face was flushed, his breathing rapid. Each whimper tore at my heart. "Signora Ricci?" A nurse appeared with a clipboard. "We can take your son now." Relief washed over me as I stood, but Mrs. Petrov touched my arm. "I go home now? My husband worry." "Of course," I said, squeezing her hand gratefully. "Thank you so much. I'll call you tomorrow." As Mrs. Petrov left, I followed the nurse through double doors into the examination area. The pediatric section was painted with faded cartoon characters, a sad attempt to make the sterile environment less frightening. The nurse directed us to a curtained cubicle. "The doctor will be with you shortly," she said, eyeing my uniform. "Are you coming from work?" I nodded, bouncing Mateo gently as he fussed. I came straight from my shift, her expression softened. "Rough night to be a single mom. There's a nasty virus going around. Half the kids in Boston seem to have it." After she left, I paced the small space, murmuring soothing words against Mateo's curls. My phone remained clutched in my hand, screen dark, no calls, no texts. The silence was more terrifying than any threat, because Dante Russo didn't make threats. He took action. The curtain rustled, and I turned, expecting the doctor. Instead, a man in a suit stepped in, the younger of Dante's bodyguards. My blood froze. "Ms. Ricci," he said quietly, his face impassive. "Mr. Russo is waiting outside." My arms tightened around Mateo. "How did you find me?" A flicker of something, pity perhaps, crossed his face. "There are only 3 emergency rooms within reasonable distance of the restaurant. This was the second one we checked." "Please," I whispered, backing away until I hit the examination table. "My son is sick. He needs a doctor, not—" "The doctor is with Mr. Russo now," he interrupted. "They'll be here momentarily." Before I could process this, the curtain parted again. Dante entered, followed by a middle-aged woman in a white coat. The small cubicle instantly seemed to shrink, his presence filling every available space. His eyes went immediately to Mateo, his expression changing in a way I couldn't decipher. Something raw and vulnerable flashed across his features before his mask of control returned. "Dr. Abruzzi is the head of pediatrics," Dante said, his voice unnervingly calm. "She'll examine him now." The doctor stepped forward with a professional smile. "Let's have a look at this little one, shall we?" I hesitated, caught between fear for my son's health and fear of the man watching us with those penetrating amber eyes. "Elena," Dante said softly, "let her help him." The quiet authority in his voice broke through my panic. I laid Mateo on the examination table, staying close as he whimpered and reached for me. The doctor worked efficiently, checking his temperature, ears, throat, and chest. Mateo screamed when she touched his right ear, confirming what I'd suspected. Ear infection, she announced. Quite severe, with a secondary viral infection causing the fever. He'll need antibiotics and something stronger for the fever than over-the-counter medications. Relief made my knees weak. But he'll be okay? Children are remarkably resilient, she assured me. The fever should break within 24-48 hours with proper medication. I'm going to admit him overnight for IV fluids and to monitor that fever, though. He's showing signs of dehydration. Fear clutched at my throat again. Admit him? I don't have insurance. The words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the precarious life I'd built, one in which a single hospital stay could destroy the fragile financial balance I maintained. That's been taken care of, Dante said, his tone brooking no argument. Dr. Abruzzi nodded. I'll get the admission process started and order his medications. A nurse will be in shortly to take you to a room. After she left, silence descended on the cubicle. Matteo had exhausted himself crying, and now lay whimpering softly as I stroked his damp curls. I could feel Dante's eyes on us, assessing, calculating. You left. His voice was quiet but edged with steel. You were supposed to wait. I kept my eyes on Matteo. My son needed me. Our son, he corrected, the two words falling like stones between us. Finally, I looked up at him. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, I could see the tension in his jaw, the tightly leashed anger in his stance, but his eyes, when they met mine, held something else entirely. Hurt. Were you ever going to tell me? He asked. The question caught me off guard with its simplicity, its raw honesty. For a moment, I saw past the mafia boss to the man, a man discovering he had a child who'd been kept from him. I don't know, I admitted. I wanted to at first. But then I heard about what happened to the Moretti family, and His expression darkened. The Morettis betrayed me. They tried to sell information to federal agents that would have destroyed everything my father and grandfather built. They had children, I whispered. 2 little girls who ended up in foster care when both their parents disappeared. Dante's face became a mask. You think I would harm a child? My own child? No. The answer came instinctively, surprising me with its certainty. Whatever else Dante Russo might be, I'd sensed that night in his arms that the rumors of his cruelty were both true and incomplete. There was honor in him, twisted though it might be. But your world would harm him. The danger, the violence, the constant looking over your shoulder. That's no life for a child. Something shifted in his expression. And living in a 1-bedroom apartment, with a mother working double shifts just to make rent, dependent on the kindness of elderly neighbors for childcare, that's the life you chose for him instead. His words stung because they contained truth. I'd been so focused on keeping Matteo away from Dante's dangerous world that I hadn't considered what I was denying him: security, opportunities, a father. The curtain rustled again as a nurse entered with a wheelchair. We're ready to take you to the pediatric ward now. I gathered Matteo into my arms, his little body heavy with exhaustion. As I moved to sit in the wheelchair, Dante stepped forward. I'll carry him, he said. Not a request, but not quite a command either. Our eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Matteo stirred, looking up blearily. His fever-bright eyes found Dante, widening slightly at the unfamiliar face. For a breathless moment, father and son regarded each other. Then, to my astonishment, Matteo reached out one small hand toward Dante. Something powerful and unnameable passed over Dante's face as he carefully took our son into his arms. Matteo settled against his chest as if he somehow recognized the man who had given him half his DNA, his little head finding a place beneath Dante's chin. The sight pierced me. This was what I had feared most, not that Dante would reject his son, but that the connection between them would be undeniable, unbreakable, that once Dante held his child, he would never let go. The nurse wheeled me alongside them as we made our way to the elevator, Dante's bodyguard following at a discreet distance. In the confined space of the elevator, I could see the wonder in Dante's eyes as he looked down at the child in his arms, the possessive curl of his fingers around Matteo's small form. He has my mother's chin, he murmured, almost to himself. And your eyes, I said softly. From the moment he was born, all I could see was you. His gaze lifted to mine, intense and searching. Yet you ran. Before I could answer, The elevator doors opened to the pediatric floor. The nurse led us to a private room. Not the shared ward I'd expected. Inside was a hospital crib, a reclining chair, and surprisingly, a small sofa. The room had clearly been arranged in haste, items brought in from elsewhere in the hospital. Dante gently laid Matteo in the crib as a different nurse entered to start the IV. I moved to my son's side, holding his hand and murmuring reassurances as the needle went in. His weak cry tore at my heart. Through it all, Dante remained, his presence a shadow at my back. When the nurse finished and left, promising to return with the first dose of antibiotics, I finally turned to face him. "Thank you," I said stiffly. "For the private room, the specialist. But you don't need to stay. I can handle this." His expression hardened. "Like you've handled everything else? Keeping my son's existence from me? Running the moment my back was turned?" "I was trying to protect him," I insisted, keeping my voice low for Matteo's sake. "From his father? From becoming a target," I hissed. "Everyone knows the Russo name in this city. Everyone knows what happens to the enemies of Dante Russo. What do you think happens to those he loves?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "They receive my protection, my resources, my life, if necessary." "And what about what I want?" I challenged, finding courage in my exhaustion and fear. "Did you consider that maybe I didn't want to be owned by you? That maybe I wanted a normal life for my son, not one surrounded by bodyguards and blood money?" The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd gone too far. Dante's face became perfectly, terrifyingly still. "Is that what you think happened between us?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. "That I sought to own you?" I swallowed hard. "I think a man like you is used to taking what he wants, and I couldn't bear it if what you wanted next was my son." Dante stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. "What I wanted," he said softly, "was to see you again after that night. What I wanted was to understand why a waitress with sad eyes and a smile that didn't reach them had haunted me for weeks. What I wanted was a chance to know you, Elena Ricci." His words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I remembered how he'd sought me out in the weeks before that night, requesting me specifically when he dined at the restaurant, how our conversations had started with simple courtesies and evolved to genuine exchanges. How, when he'd finally invited me for a drink after my shift, it had felt inevitable. "And now?" I whispered, acutely aware of Matteo sleeping fitfully in his crib beside us. Dante's eyes darkened. "Now I want my son, and I'm not a man accustomed to being denied what's mine." Morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting thin stripes across Matteo's sleeping face. His fever had broken sometime in the early hours, his little body finally cool to the touch. Relief had left me hollow, exhaustion seeping into my bones as I curled awkwardly in the reclining chair beside his crib. I hadn't meant to fall asleep, not with Dante still in the room. Yet there he was when I opened my eyes, seated on the small sofa, his jacket removed and shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. Despite having spent the night in a hospital room, he looked immaculate, not a hair out of place, his posture perfect even in repose. Only the shadow of stubble on his jaw betrayed the passage of time. His eyes met mine, alert despite the early hour. He'd been watching me sleep. His fever broke at 3:17 a.m., he said quietly. The nurse came in twice. "You didn't wake either time." I pushed myself upright, wincing at the stiffness in my neck. "You stayed all night?" "Of course." The simple certainty in his voice made my chest tighten. I stood, stretching discreetly as I moved to check on Matteo. His cheeks had lost their alarming flush, his breathing deep and even. The IV in his tiny hand was secured with colorful tape decorated with cartoon characters. I touched his curls gently, relief washing through me anew. "He looks like my brother did at that age," Dante said, coming to stand beside me. "Salvatore was the spitting image of our father, just as I was of our grandfather." The casual mention of his family startled me. In all the rumors and whispers about Dante Russo, his personal history remained largely shrouded. People spoke of his business dealings, his ruthlessness, his calculated generosity to those under his protection, but rarely of the man himself. You never mentioned a brother that night, I said cautiously. A shadow crossed his face. Salvatore died when I was 15. A drive-by shooting meant for my father. Horror washed through me. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. His voice was controlled, but I caught the lingering pain beneath the words. He touched Matteo's hand with one finger, the gentleness of the gesture at odds with everything I'd heard about him. My father changed after that, became harder, more ruthless. He taught me that in our world, love is weakness, because it gives your enemies leverage. I swallowed hard. Is that what you believe? His amber eyes, so like our son's, met mine. I believed it until I saw his face. He nodded toward Matteo. Now I understand what my father meant. Love doesn't make you weak. It makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability can be dangerous. That's why I ran, I whispered. I couldn't bear the thought of Matteo becoming that kind of vulnerability. A target. Dante's expression hardened. You think I couldn't protect my own son? I think you have enemies powerful enough to make you post guards outside a hospital room all night, I countered, having noticed the suited man stationed outside our door when a nurse entered earlier. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Observant. I've had to be. He studied me for a long moment. You've been running your whole life, haven't you, Elena? Not just from me. The perception in his gaze unsettled me. That night, between urgent kisses and whispered confessions, I'd told him things I'd never shared with anyone. About my father's gambling debts that had forced us to move constantly as a child. About the scholarship I'd lost when I had to take care of my mother during her illness. About dreams deferred and hopes abandoned. My life hasn't been easy, I admitted. But it's mine. I make my own choices. And what about Matteo's choices? He asked quietly. Where is his voice in all this? The question landed like a blow. I turned away, pretending to adjust Matteo's blanket to hide the emotion on my face. What right did I have to deny my son his father, especially a father who clearly wanted him? What right did I have to deny him the security, the opportunities, the life that Dante could provide? But the counterpoint came just as swiftly. What right did I have to expose him to Dante's world, to the danger that had claimed his uncle's life? A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. A nurse entered with a breakfast tray and Matteo's morning medication. Good news, she said cheerfully. Dr. Abruzzi says if he continues improving, you can take him home this afternoon. Home. The word echoed hollowly. My tiny apartment with its leaking faucet and temperamental heating. The place where I'd brought my newborn son. Where I'd whispered promises into his tiny ear that I would always keep him safe. Always put him first. The nurse checked Matteo's vitals and changed his IV bag, chatting pleasantly about the beautiful flowers that had been delivered to the nurse's station for us. I smiled and nodded, not missing how she kept glancing at Dante with a mixture of curiosity and unease. When she left, an uncomfortable silence fell between us. I have a proposition, Dante finally said, his tone businesslike. Come stay at my house while Matteo recovers. It's quiet, secure, with a full staff including a live-in doctor. He'll receive the best care possible. I stared at him. You want us to move in with you? Temporarily, he clarified. Until he's fully recovered. After that, we can discuss more permanent arrangements. My spine stiffened. Permanent arrangements? His expression remained impassive. Matteo is my son. I intend to be part of his life going forward. How that looks is something we need to discuss, but I think we can both agree that your current living situation is not ideal. Anger flared, hot and sudden. You don't get to walk into our lives after 14 months and start making judgments about how I've raised him. I've done everything to give him a good life. I know you have, he said, and the unexpected gentleness in his voice doused my anger. I can see how much you love him, Elena. It's written in every sacrifice you've made, every double shift you've worked. He stepped closer. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. The sincerity in his eyes weakened my resolve. For 14 months I'd carried the weight of single motherhood, the constant worry about money, the exhaustion, the fear that one misstep would bring everything crashing down. The thought of sharing that burden, even with someone like Dante, was tempting in a way I hadn't anticipated. "I need time to think," I said finally. He nodded once, accepting my non-answer with surprising grace. "The offer stands. For now, I have some business to attend to. My driver will take you and Matteo to my house when he's discharged." I didn't agree to... "Elena." He cut me off, his voice gentle but firm. "Your apartment has no air conditioning. It's August in Boston, and Matteo is recovering from a high fever. Think of what's best for him right now, not your pride." The truth of his words stung. My apartment would be stifling in the summer heat, the ancient fan in the window doing little to cool the stuffy rooms. "1 week," I conceded reluctantly, "just until he's better." Something like triumph flashed in Dante's eyes, quickly masked. "My driver will bring some of your things from your apartment. Is there anything specific you need?" The casual way he spoke of having someone enter my home should have alarmed me, but I was too exhausted to protest. I gave him a short list: Matteo's favorite stuffed elephant, his comfort blanket, my toiletries, enough clothes for a few days. Dante made a quick phone call, relaying my requests in rapid Italian. When he hung up, he approached the bed and, to my surprise, leaned down to press a gentle kiss to Matteo's forehead. "I'll return this afternoon," he said, straightening. His eyes met mine, intense and unreadable. "Try to rest. You look exhausted." After he left, I sank back into the chair, my mind spinning with the implications of what I'd agreed to. 1 week in Dante Russo's home. 1 week of watching my son bond with his father. 1 week that could change everything. Matteo stirred, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw me, a smile spread across his face, and he reached for me with grabby hands. "Mama." I lifted him carefully, mindful of the IV, and settled him in my lap. He snuggled against me, still warm, but no longer burning with fever. "Hey, little man," I murmured against his curls. "Feeling better?" He babbled happily in response, the worst of his illness behind him. As I held him, I couldn't help but think of how he'd reached for Dante, how natural he had looked in his father's arms. The hours passed slowly. Matteo napped, ate a little applesauce, and played with the stuffed dog a nurse brought him. Dr. Abruzzi returned mid-morning, pleased with his progress, and confirming he could be discharged after lunch. By 1 o'clock, we were prepared to leave. Matteo, dressed in the fresh clothes Dante's driver had delivered, squirmed in my arms as a nurse went through discharge instructions. I nodded automatically, accepting prescriptions and follow-up appointment cards, my stomach knotting with each passing minute. Just as we finished, Dante appeared in the doorway. He'd changed into a fresh suit, dark blue this time, his presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the room. The nurse faltered mid-sentence, her eyes widening slightly. "Ready?" he asked, crossing to us and taking the discharge papers from my hand. He reviewed them quickly before passing them to one of his men who had materialized beside him. I nodded, unable to find my voice as the reality of what I'd agreed to settled over me. Matteo, however, had no such reservations. He looked at Dante curiously, then broke into a gummy smile, reaching one hand toward him. Something softened in Dante's expression. Without hesitation, he took Matteo from my arms, settling him expertly against his chest. "Hello, Piccolo. Feeling better?" Matteo patted Dante's face in response, fascinated by the stubble on his jaw. The nurse wheeled me to the hospital entrance, where a sleek black SUV with tinted windows waited at the curb. Dante's driver held the door as Dante carefully placed Matteo in a brand new car seat, one that certainly hadn't been there when we arrived at the hospital. "You've been busy," I observed as I slid in beside my son. Dante gave me an unreadable look as he settled across from us. "I take care of what's mine." The possessive statement sent a shiver down my spine. Not entirely from fear. I remembered all too well how those hands had claimed my body that night, how his whispered words had made me feel simultaneously possessed and cherished. The drive to Dante's home took us out of the city, through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, until we turned onto a private road lined with ancient oaks. Wrought iron gates opened silently as we approached, revealing a sprawling estate set back from the road. The house itself was a stunning blend of old-world architecture and modern design, stone and glass, elegant and imposing. "This is where you live?" I asked, unable to keep the awe from my voice. A smile touched Dante's lips. One of my homes, yes. The SUV pulled to a stop at the front entrance, where a middle-aged woman in a simple black dress waited. As we exited the vehicle, she stepped forward with a warm smile. "Welcome home, Mr. Russo," she said, her accent distinctly Italian. Her eyes moved to Matteo and me, her expression softening. "And welcome to you both. I'm Sophia, the housekeeper." "Elena," I said, feeling strangely self-conscious in my rumpled clothes. "And this is Matteo." Sophia's eyes crinkled as she smiled at my son. "He looks just like you did as a baby, Mr. Russo. The same eyes." Dante nodded, something like pride flickering across his face. "Sophia has been with my family since I was born. She'll show you to your rooms while I speak with Dr. Gentile about Matteo's care." "Doctor?" I questioned. "My personal physician," Dante explained. "He'll be monitoring Matteo's recovery." The casual display of wealth and power, private doctors, sprawling estates, staff waiting at attention, made my head spin. This was the world I'd kept my son from. A world of privilege and protection, but also of dangerous secrets and powerful enemies. Sophia led us through the house, which was even more impressive inside. Soaring ceilings, museum-quality art, furniture that looked both expensive and ancient. Yet despite its grandeur, there was a warmth to the place I hadn't expected. Touches of home amid the luxury. She showed us to a suite on the second floor. A spacious bedroom with an adjoining nursery that had clearly been hastily assembled, but was nonetheless perfect, with a crib, changing table, and toys still in their packaging. My own luggage sat neatly at the foot of a king-sized bed that looked sinfully comfortable after the hospital chair. "The bathroom is through there," Sophia said, pointing to a door. "Dinner will be at 7, but I can bring something up earlier if you prefer. Mr. Russo thought you might want to rest after your night at the hospital." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the consideration. After Sophia left, I explored the rooms, Matteo on my hip. The bathroom was larger than my entire apartment, with a freestanding tub and shower big enough for 3 people. The nursery had a window seat overlooking manicured gardens and what looked like a pool in the distance. Everything spoke of money, of power, of a life I'd never imagined for myself or my son. I was laying Matteo down for a nap when a soft knock came at the door. I opened it to find Dante, his tie removed and collar unbuttoned. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" he asked, his eyes moving past me to where Matteo was already drifting to sleep in his new crib. "It's beautiful," I admitted. "Too beautiful. This isn't real life, Dante, at least not my life." His expression turned serious. It could be. The simple statement hung in the air between us, loaded with implications. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dante stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the heat of his body. "Everything, Elena, for both of you." My heart thundered in my chest. "And what would you expect in return?" His eyes darkened. "That's the question, isn't it? What do you think I want from you?" Before I could answer, Matteo called out sleepily from his crib. I turned automatically, grateful for the interruption. "We'll continue this conversation later," Dante said softly. "Rest now. You're safe here." As he walked away, I couldn't help but wonder if that was true. Because in Dante Russo's world, safety came with strings attached. And I wasn't sure I was ready to learn what those strings might be, or if I'd already become hopelessly entangled in them. Days at Dante's estate fell into an unexpected rhythm. Matteo recovered quickly, his energy returning with each passing day. By the 3rd morning, he was crawling rapidly through the spacious rooms, pulling himself up on furniture and babbling excitedly at everything new he discovered. I watched him bloom in this environment. From the nutritious meals prepared by Dante's personal chef to the gentle attention of Sophia, who doted on him as if he were her own grandchild. Dr. Gentile visited daily, pronouncing himself satisfied with Matteo's progress and adjusting his medications accordingly. And then there was Dante. Despite what I'd expected, what I'd feared, he didn't try to take over. Instead, he observed, learning Matteo's routines, his preferences, the little quirks that made him uniquely himself. He scheduled his meetings around Matteo's nap times and returned home each evening before bath time, slipping into our lives with a naturalness that was both comforting and terrifying. On the 4th evening, I found myself on the terrace outside my suite, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of gold and crimson. Matteo had fallen asleep early, exhausted from an afternoon spent exploring the garden with Sophia. Wine? Dante's voice came from behind me. I turned to find him holding 2 glasses, his suit jacket discarded, the top buttons of his shirt undone. I accepted the glass, careful not to let our fingers touch. We'd been circling each other like this for days, polite, cautious, the tension between us building with each passing hour. Matteo tried to say Sophia's name today, I said, taking a sip of the wine. It was rich and complex, probably costing more than I made in a week. It came out as Fia, but she was delighted. A smile touched Dante's lips. She's always wanted grandchildren. My father's business made that difficult. Few of us marry. Fewer have children. Because of the danger, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Because of many things. We stood in silence for a moment, watching as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees. Our week is almost up, I finally said, the words catching in my throat. Dante's expression remained impassive, but I felt the sudden tension in his body beside me. And I don't know what happens next. I set my glass down on the stone balustrade, turning to face him fully. This isn't our world, Dante. Beautiful as it is, dangerous as it might be, it's not where we belong. Where do you belong then? He asked, his voice soft but intent. In that apartment with the leaking faucet? Working double shifts while your son is raised by an elderly neighbor? Struggling to make ends meet when I have more than enough for all of us? Each question struck like a physical blow, because each contained a truth I couldn't deny. It's not about money, I insisted, though part of me knew that was a lie. Of course it was about money, about security, stability, the things I'd never had and desperately wanted for my son. Then what is it about, Elena? Dante set his own glass down, stepping closer. Why are you so determined to deny what's between us? There is nothing between us, I said, the words hollow even to my own ears. There was one night, one mistake. His eyes darkened. Is that what you think Matteo is? A mistake? No. The denial burst from me. Never. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And yet you would deny him his father? His heritage? Everything I can give him? I would protect him from your world, I corrected, anger flaring. From the violence, the danger, the fear that comes with the Russo name. Dante's jaw tightened. You know nothing of my world. I know enough. I know your brother was killed in a drive-by meant for your father. I know the Moretti parents disappeared, leaving their children orphans. I know men fear your name in this city. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Yes, they fear me. And that fear keeps those I care about safe. He moved closer still, until I could feel the heat of his body. Do you think I haven't had men watching your apartment since the day I discovered Matteo's existence? Did you never wonder why your neighborhood, not the safest in Boston, seemed to leave you alone? Why no one bothered the single mother with the beautiful baby boy? Shock rendered me speechless. I'd assumed my relative's safety was due to good luck, to keeping my head down, to the watchful eye of Mrs. Petroff. The idea that Dante had been protecting us from afar, without my knowledge or consent, sent conflicting emotions coursing through me, anger at the invasion, gratitude for the protection, fear at how easily he'd inserted himself into our lives. That's an invasion of privacy, I finally managed. A humorless smile curved his lips. No, Elena, that's what it means to be a Russo. To protect what's ours, by any means necessary. We are not yours, I insisted, even as something inside me wavered at the intensity in his gaze. Aren't you? His voice dropped lower, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. Matteo carries my blood, my name, whether you've given it to him or not. And you? His hand came up, fingers brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. You've carried a piece of me since that night. I see it in your eyes when you look at me, the same thing I feel when I look at you. I should have stepped back, should have maintained the careful distance I'd enforced between us all week. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch. my body remembering what my mind had tried to forget, how perfectly we had fit together that night. How his hands had drawn pleasure from me I'd never known existed. How safe I'd felt in his arms despite knowing exactly who and what he was. I was afraid, I whispered, the admission costing me more than he could know. Not just of your world, but of how I felt about you. One night, and I couldn't get you out of my head. What kind of future could there be for someone like me with someone like you? His thumb traced my lower lip, his eyes following the movement. Someone like you, he repeated softly. A woman of uncommon strength, a mother who would do anything to protect her child. A survivor who has faced every hardship life has thrown at her and remained standing. His gaze lifted to mine, burning with an intensity that took my breath away. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world, Elena? How valuable? Before I could respond, the baby monitor on the terrace table crackled with Mateo's fussing. I pulled away reflexively, my body already tuned to my son's needs. I should check on him, I said, my voice unsteady. Dante nodded, stepping back to allow me space. We're not finished with this conversation. It wasn't a threat, but a promise. I slipped past him, feeling the weight of his gaze on my back as I returned to the suite. Mateo had kicked off his blanket, his little face scrunched in momentary discomfort. I replaced the blanket, stroking his curls until he settled again. As I stood watching him sleep, the reality of our situation crashed over me. In less than 3 days, our week would be up. I would be expected to make a decision. Return to my apartment, to my struggle, to the life I'd built for us. Or accept what Dante was offering: security, protection, a father for my son, and perhaps something for myself I'd never dared to want. The sound of raised voices drew me from my thoughts. Male voices, coming from downstairs, one of them Dante's, his usual controlled tone replaced with something colder, more dangerous. I moved to the door, opening it a crack to listen. Unacceptable, Dante was saying. I made myself perfectly clear. The Colombians are restless, another voice responded. They say the delay is costing them money. And I said I needed a week. 1 week of no business, no meetings, no problems. Is that too much to ask after 15 years of service? With respect, boss, they don't care about your personal situation. They want the shipment cleared or they'll find someone else who can do it. A heavy silence followed, one that raised the hair on the back of my neck. Tell them, Dante finally said, his voice deadly quiet, that if they so much as think about working with anyone else in my territory, what happened to the Garza family will look like a children's birthday party in comparison. The cold brutality in his tone froze the blood in my veins. This was the Dante Russo of rumors and whispered warnings, the man who had built an empire on fear and violence, who disposed of enemies without remorse, the man whose blood ran in my son's veins. I closed the door silently, leaning against it as my heart pounded. For a few days, I'd allowed myself to forget what he was, to see only the man who held our son with such tenderness, who looked at me with desire and something deeper in his eyes, but the truth could not be denied. Dante Russo was dangerous, to his enemies certainly, but perhaps also to anyone who got too close, anyone who became a vulnerability. I returned to Mateo's crib, watching the rise and fall of his little chest. Whatever I decided would shape his entire future. If I took him back to our apartment, to our struggle, I would be denying him his father, his heritage, the security Dante could provide. But if I stayed, if I accepted Dante's offer, I would be binding my son to a world of shadows and secrets, of power built on fear. A soft knock interrupted my spiraling thoughts. I opened the door to find Sophia, her kind face creased with concern. Mr. Russo asked me to tell you he's been called away on urgent business, she said. He may not return until late tonight. I nodded, unsurprised after what I'd overheard. Thank you, Sophia. She hesitated, then added, He also asked me to give you this. She handed me a small envelope, Dante's bold handwriting spelling my name across the front. After she left, I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a key and a short note. 3rd floor, East Wing, last door on the left. If you want to understand, go tonight after Mateo is settled. D. Curiosity warred with apprehension. What would I find in that room, More evidence of Dante's criminal enterprises? Some dark secret he wanted to share? The hours crawled by. I bathed Matteo, fed him dinner, read him stories until his eyes grew heavy. By 8 o'clock, he was sound asleep, exhausted from his day of exploration and play. I asked Sophia to listen for him through the baby monitor, claiming I needed a bath. Instead, I made my way to the 3rd floor, the key clutched in my hand. The east wing was quieter, less lived in than the rest of the house. I found the door easily. Heavy wood, unmarked and unassuming. The key turned smoothly in the lock. I pushed the door open, unsure what to expect. Light spilled automatically from recessed fixtures, illuminating what appeared to be a private study. Bookshelves lined one wall. A massive desk dominated the center of the room, and a sitting area with leather chairs was arranged near a fireplace. But what caught my attention were the photographs. They covered the walls, arranged in careful chronology, a visual history of the Russo family. I moved closer, drawn to the oldest images, a stern-faced man and woman in formal attire, surrounded by children. A young boy, perhaps 10, with Dante's eyes in serious expression. A teenager who could only be Dante standing beside an older man who shared his features, both in dark suits. And then, heartbreakingly, images of another boy. Younger, smiling, with the same amber eyes but a gentler face. Salvatore, I realized. Dante's brother who'd been killed. As I moved through the room, the photographs told their story, Dante growing older, his expression hardening with each passing year. His father aging, then appearing in fewer and fewer images until he disappeared entirely. Dante taking center stage, always impeccably dressed, always surrounded by men who regarded him with a mixture of respect and fear. But interspersed with these formal images were others, more private, more personal. Dante laughing with an older woman who had to be his mother. Dante kneeling beside a child's hospital bed, the occupant out of frame. Dante at what appeared to be a small private memorial service, his face a mask of controlled grief. On the desk sat a single framed photograph that made my heart stop. Dante and me, the night we met. We were at the restaurant bar after closing, my head thrown back in laughter at something he'd said, his eyes on me with an expression I hadn't noticed at the time, something intense and wondering, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. I hadn't known a photograph existed of that night, hadn't known someone had captured that moment before everything changed. Behind the desk, a door stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open to find a smaller room, one that brought tears to my eyes. It was a nursery, fully furnished, perfectly appointed, with a crib, changing table, rocking chair, and toys. A child's paradise, waiting for its occupant, waiting for Matteo. On the wall hung a single photograph, an image of Matteo I recognized from my own phone. He was perhaps 6 months old, laughing at the camera, his amber eyes bright with joy. Dante must have taken it from my phone that night at the restaurant when he'd discovered Matteo's existence. I had it built the night I found out about him. I whirled to find Dante standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He'd changed from his suit into dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, making him look younger, more approachable. "How long have you been watching us?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Since the hospital confirmed your pregnancy, 3 weeks after you disappeared." He entered the room slowly, as if afraid I might flee. I didn't know for certain he was mine until I saw the first photos my men obtained of him at 3 months old. Those eyes. He trailed off, his gaze moving to the photograph on the wall. There was no doubt then. "And you just waited? For 14 months?" He moved to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. I needed to be sure, not just that he was mine, but that I was. He hesitated, a rare uncertainty crossing his features. That I was worthy of him, of being his father. The admission stunned me. "I don't understand." Dante turned to face me, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. "My father became a monster after Salvatore died. Cold, ruthless. He cared for nothing but revenge and power." His jaw tightened. "I swore I would never become him. But this life, it changes you, hardens you. I needed to know I could still feel something other than anger or calculation before I claimed my son." "And what did you discover?" I asked softly. His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering, that I could still feel everything. "For both of you." The raw honesty in his voice broke something inside me. Here was the man I'd glimpsed that night 14 months ago, not just the dangerous crime boss, but the man beneath the armor. A man shaped by loss and violence, yes, but also by love and loyalty. "I heard you earlier," I admitted, "talking about the Colombians, about the Garza family, that part of your life. It terrifies me, Dante, not for myself, but for Mateo." He nodded, accepting my fear without attempting to dismiss it. "My world is dangerous. I won't pretend otherwise, but it's also changing. The old ways, my father's ways, are dying out. What I've built is different, more legitimate. The violence you heard tonight is the exception now, not the rule. Can you promise me that Mateo will never be touched by it? That he'll never be in danger because of who his father is?" Dante crossed to me, taking my hands in his. "I can promise you that I will burn this world to the ground before I let any harm come to him, or to you." His thumbs traced circles on my wrists. "I've spent 14 months watching my son from a distance, Elena. Building this room, hoping someday he would sleep here. I've spent 14 months wondering about you. If you were safe, if you were happy, if you ever thought of me. I thought of you every day," I whispered, the truth finally breaking free. Every time I looked at Mateo's eyes, every time he smiled or frowned in that way that's so completely you, I swallowed hard. I was afraid of wanting you, of needing you. I've always taken care of myself, and then suddenly there was this man who could give me everything I'd ever needed. But at what cost? "Stay and find out," he said simply. "Not just for a week, not just for Mateo, for yourself, for us." He lifted one hand to my face, cupping my cheek with a gentleness that belied his strength. "I'm not asking you to love me, Elena. Not yet. I'm asking you to give us a chance to become what we could be, a family." The word hung between us, loaded with promise and possibility. Family. The thing I'd never truly had, the thing I desperately wanted to give Mateo. "I'm scared," I admitted. "So am I," he confessed, surprising me again. "I've faced down rival families, federal agents, betrayals from within my own organization, and none of it frightened me like the thought of failing you and Mateo." In that moment, I saw the truth. The dangerous, powerful Dante Russo, feared throughout Boston, ruthless in business and more ruthless to his enemies, was as vulnerable to love as anyone. Perhaps more so, because he'd known so little of it in his life. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against his chest. His arms came around me, strong and secure, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I allowed myself to lean on someone else's strength. "One step at a time," I murmured against his shirt. "We'll figure it out together." His arms tightened around me. "Together," he agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. We stayed like that for a long moment, the future stretching before us. Uncertain, yes, but no longer something I faced alone. Whatever came next, whatever challenges we encountered, we would face them as a family. Mateo would have his father, would know the strength and protection of the Russo name, would grow up surrounded by love instead of fear, and I would have the chance to discover what might have been, what might still be, with the man who had claimed my heart that night 14 months ago, and had never truly let it go. As Dante's lips found mine in a kiss that felt like coming home, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I'd made the right choice, not just for Mateo, but for myself, because sometimes the most dangerous path is also the one that leads to everything you never knew you wanted. Everything you never dared to dream you deserved.